Okay.
Hello, this is Chipakkan, and welcome to Changing Times, Changing Worlds show Otherworldly. Tonight, I haven't got a guest. I am having I'm going to be sharing a workshop I put together on weather magic. No matter where you are, you're having some weather. I suppose maybe California just has climate, but most of us have weather. And so I'm going to be talking about weather magic. And there's two basic kinds of weather magic. There is the we want to mess with it, weather magic is what we mostly think of. And there's the divination, which we also might think of as things like if she buys kippers, it will not rain, or uh, it's or it's a ground did the groundhog see a shadow. We have there's predictive magic. Mostly these days we call it meteorology, and I like to point at meteorology as a type of divination. If you learn a lot about a subject and you see how one thing leads to another, this is not a surprising thing when you can figure out what's liable to happen next. Uh, the red sky at night, sailors delight. Red sky in the morning, sailors take warning. That's based on the fact that the Earth spins, so weather tends to come from the west, and so red sky at night means a red sunset, which means that the weather over there has there's a new front coming in, and then it's probably going to be good weather. There's more little particles that can get caught by the sun, and so it's a not a it's not rocket science. No, it's weather science, and so it's not, but it just strikes me as having so much in common with other forms of divination that we should look at it and try and I'd like to think of it as doing as demystifying divination. Yeah, Griffith, did you had something that you wanted to say?
I actually am going to pose a question that might steer the course of tonight's discussion. And that is what can and cannot be done with weather magic?
Well, I will be happy to talk about that because that is actually one of the things that I was planning on doing.
Okay, well,
To me,
that
it falls into the category of ethics, and we're going to get to that. That's kind of where I wanted to go. But as usual, those who know me are going to know that I will start with some history and with a few definitions. I mean, we all do the messing around with that. Every little kid has probably learned the rain, rain, go away, come again another day. Little Johnny wants to play, or little whoever wants to play. Why? Because, and this is actually not a bad spell because it tells you, says the intent, it addresses who it's addressing, it explains why you want this to happen. So it's and that's that I like the way that it's structured, and whether or not you have actually gotten it to work is probably dependent on A, your natural talent, and B, your how much juice you're throwing into it, how much energy you're doing, which is like almost every uh, uh, type of spell. But yeah, should we then go from that to uh, what can you do and what should you do? But I will just make it more clear because I don't think I made it clear. most magic is based on it's something that you can do through manipulating energy. Everybody has different talents that they're born with. Some people are born to do divination. Some are born healers. Some are born to talk to plants. Some are born to talk to the weather patterns. And the more talent you have, the easier it's going to be. And the more you practice, the more you learn, the better it's going to work. I was talking this weekend to a biologist who teaches biology at some university, and he's an alchemist. And I said, people are always telling me that, magic and science are against each other. And he says, no, they're not. And I said, of course they're not. The more science you know, the easier, the better you can do magic. This is silly. So, yeah.
Sir Isaac Newton would have found that a very interesting position to take.
Arnett, is that you?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I'm not seeing your view, so I can't pin you, but speak, because it sounds cool.
My phone at this point, so I'm not sure how well this is going to work. But yeah, Sir Isaac Newton and various other folks who were natural philosophers and alchemists and various magicians of different stripes would have found that an extremely interesting position. Oh, gee, magic and science aren't compatible. What?
Yeah, doesn't make sense to some of us. But anyway, so to just whiz through a couple of definitions I had jotted in my notes. There's a term, weather witching, and weather witching is a term that is used both for playing with the weather and predicting the weather and dowsing. And it's any form of bringing the weather under human control. But it is also associated by some people with water witching, which is dowsing. So there is a term, a Latin term for storm witch is a tempestari. Ariomancy is a Greek term for divination by reading the sky. And that's the two foreign terms that I pulled out. Frankly, weather witching it's what you do. My kids have taken to referring to airbending, having watched Avatar: The Last Airbender. I have no problem with this because they have taken what they saw on the series of anime, and they have made it into an effective magic form. I have seen them move weather patterns around. So, if it doesn't matter whether you're using a spell from the Middle Ages. There's a post that I've seen go around Facebook several times, and it hit my inbox again today, which said, a few years ago, I was in a museum that had old grimoires and alchemy books on display with translations posted next to them, because most of us don't read Latin anymore. My favorite grimoire page was the spell for rain, in which the person would go outside with a bucket full of water and pour it on the ground and proceed to pretty much yell at the clouds, just saying essentially, it's not that hard. And that's the favorite rain spell I've ever seen. This is actually, or as somebody described it, what that is unsympathetic magic. It's shaming the clouds till they won't slack off anymore. And yeah, there are many, depending on what the weather you are in your locality, many cultures have weather magic, some of which, like in the American Southwest, it's a group project. If people need rain, if the food you're living on desperately needs rain, the whole Hopi tribe comes out there and the specialists dance and they try and get the rain to come. Whereas when when you live in a more favorable climate, you don't have to mess around with it as much. Who likes who does the most weather working? There are two groups generally. There are the farmers who need the rain and they need the sun, and the others are the sailors who can get pretty screwed up if the wind is against them. We have seen, and I personally keep thinking of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, where you have the it seems like every other, it's not quite that many, but every other notation in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles is some kind of hailstorm or unnatural storm, or a dragon was seen in the sky or something like that. The sagas talk about weather working. There are lots of charms that have been passed down in the books that the black books of the cunning men and women, cocaine, and there's lots of books for them. But I would say the vast majority of them fall into relatively two versions. One is imitating what you're looking for, like whistling. Whistling is supposed to bring up a storm, which is why you're not supposed to whistle on a boat, because they only want the control to be within the person who's trying to do it. The other is putting knots in things. And there are two pretty famous ones. The English thought the Scottish, which are the best at controlling the weather. And in Scandinavia, the Sami, or what were called for a while the Lapps, we don't call them that anymore. They don't. Do they still call them the Finns? Finland, I suppose, is still Finland. But the Sami people were the great sorcerers, and everybody was afraid of them. But they also would go and buy the spells for them. Sea captains would carry a bag that had 3 cords around it. They would carry a rope that had 3 knots in it. They would carry a clout, or a piece of cloth that had water. It had been knotted while wet, and when you undid one knot, it let the wind start. And if you undid the second knot, the wind got to be a good healthy wind. And don't go for the 3rd knot. One thing I discovered in my researching this is the 3rd knot was always on the inside. So if you have a rope or a clout, this is the 3rd knot. This is and you undo the 2 end ones. Which makes sense to me, but you do that to hold you're trapping the wind and the rain in it. And another thing I've read about, this is not historical, it's a modern witch. If it's raining, she will take her hair and she will let it, if it has gotten wet, she braids it up tightly and that becomes what she is knotting, and then she goes home, and then she lets it out when she gets home, and it holds the rain off until she gets home, and so she doesn't get any wetter. Okay. But there's I think that mostly what people who are here at for this are interested in is they want to know how to mess with the weather, and the other thing I'm going to cover is how not to mess with the weather. Please don't do this because it's a bad idea. Should I start one? Okay, but the 2 things they tend to control is the moisture, the rain, and the other is the wind. And to control, if you want rain, what you do is you get the rag wet, or the rope wet, and then you knot it, and that holds it in. and then you untie it. One thing that you have to do if you're trying to bring up a storm is you take your hair down. You do not have your braids up. You have everything down. Another one I really liked is, Gretchen's going to love this one. You take out your knife and you point the blade of the knife into the direction to the west, probably where the wind's coming from, and you run screaming at the wind, so that you are cutting the wind. And this is how you will, if you want the wind to stop, dripping the tiles off your roof, you do that. But if you want to cut the wind, and then you take your knife and you jam it into the ground, but again with the blade aimed at the wind, so that the wind will cut around it. Now,
My wind
Example of
die.
that.
Hmm?
There was an example of that at an event that I attended where a tropical storm / hurricane was coming at the campground, and someone local who knew the weather patterns went out and basically formed a wedge so that we were within the space that was the storm would come and split around us. And apparently the next morning, when people drove out in the neighborhood, they saw that trees had been knocked down on either side of the campground. It was rather impressive.
And I actually love that. Mostly I see weather magic being done at Penzic. Now, Penzic is a SCA event where you get about 10,000 of your closest friends intense during essentially what is hurricane season. August in Western Pennsylvania is hurricane season. And every so often a kicker of a storm comes running across and threatens to make box kites out of all the little pop-ups and the little those little tents that are like 1 or 2 men tents, that we call them timples, and they fly really well. And so, but scary thing. I saw pictures of somebody taking film with their camera. Well, flying overhead were 4 or 5 easy pop-up tents, and it's like, they're going to come down, guys. Those things are 30 or 40 feet up. Get out of the way. Just figure out which direction this thing is going and move. And that's where what I would do would be, I would take if I had nothing, I would use my arm, but I would go opposite to the direction of where the wind was doing and try and unwind it so that it will go down. But I like, now that we have our little toys like these that we can use, I like watching the weather patterns. You can watch on the radar, and the weather pattern is coming in from the west, and then it comes to where Penzic is, and it splits like that, and then it goes around it, and it goes back together. And in my opinion, that's the way weather working should be done. You do the least possible messing around with it. You protect a specific thing. You got 10,000 people living in tents. You don't want them all blowing away. You don't want everything to be wet. You don't want to have 5,000 people trying to use the same 4 dryers. But so I have seen my girls and their friends who have worked with them out in the street doing kind of a dance and saying, "You're doing this," and they're kind of doing this in unison, and it's a beautiful thing. And you're watching as all the black clouds go a little bit to the south and a little bit to the north, and all these airbenders are pushing it. And then I check the radar and watch this little bright red thing split in 2 and go around us. And I like that it reforms. Now, my this is not, now we didn't have the weather apps on our phones in those days, but when I first joined the SCA, Cassandra of Bint Bethlehem was, if we had a big storm coming, they would take her and they would put her up on the hill where she could watch most of the campsite, and they would make sure they kept her well fed, well hydrated, and warm, and she would make sure that the weather went to one or the other side of us. I don't think she split them, but which goes back to your basics. You got to have the basics. Keep the weather worker grounded and comfortable. And if you can't concentrate on your working, then you can't pull it off. So what else? So the witches in the Middle Ages would sell these knotted ropes as these knotted clouts in order to do it. Another technique I read about was they would beat a wet cloth on a rock. Now, what happens if you take a wet cloth and you beat on a rock? You're going to be having water flying around. It's like the thing we mentioned in the first with the unsympathetic magic, is you're showing them how to do it. There's a spell charm, I think I call it, in Conjure, where you take a broom and you dip it in water and you shake the broom in the air. You're showing it how to do it. There's another one where you take handfuls of water from a bucket and you throw it in the air and you see, do it that way. Very, very similar. You can use your own terms. Another thing that they would do sometimes, they would knock flints together, which sounds to me like they're trying to cause lightning, but you toss them over your shoulder behind you toward the west. Another thing that they would do is just clicking stones together. Another thing that they do in places that have beaches is fling handfuls of sand in the air. As far as I can tell, that's trying to make the sound of rain. You're showing them how it's done. You can also, they call it beating. You take a broom and you beat the water. You go to a stream or something and you hit it with your broom. Well, you have already established in your experience that the broom is a magical implement for you, and you're doing this thing that throws water into the air. So that should get the, you're splashing. And another version of it has taking your broom, dipping it, and swinging it around your head. I have known heathens who take their Thor's hammer and they swing it around their head to bring on a lightning storm, because you want to feel that you have the power to do that. I know. I mean, let's face it. One of the things that I would say do not do, which I have seen done, is do not go out in the middle of a lightning storm and yell Thor is a pussy at the sky. I mean, admittedly, the chances of you actually getting hit by lightning are fairly small, because Thor has a pretty good sense of humor and likes people, and he probably thinks that's pretty funny. But on the other hand, have you been kind of a jerk and have pissed him off in some other way, you might take the opportunity.
Yeah, crispy critter.
Are you going to? No, but there's lots of things. There's one of the things that is in the type of magic that I don't use that much is there are incenses that you can use. There are herbs that you can burn to bring rain. The smoke that's going up is it's an offering to the gods, and it's also a hint to the sky to make clouds. And there's, of course, there's dancing, there's singing, there's playing musical instruments. Wind instruments are very good for bringing up wind. there was a confession made in, let's see if we, Aldern in Nainshire in the year 1662. Quote, when we raise the wind, we take a rag of cloth and wet it in water, and then we take a beetle and knock the rag on a stone, and we say thrice over, I knock this rag upon the stain to raise the wind in the devil's name. It shall not lie until I please again. Okay, that's
Okay. Yeah.
But on the other hand, that at that time, these women were all probably raised, or men, Christians, and therefore they had been told that God took care of everything that was spirit, and the devil was given the earth, and therefore, if you wanted power from the earth, you were working with the devil, and so there was. So, how much of what was confessions during the witch trials did they just say, oh, screw you, you're planning on killing me anyway, I'm just going to come up with something really cool? Or maybe it was something they did, or maybe it was something that the priests put in. I mean, if you go to the Malus Maleficarum, they have figured out how to make it into a assembly line for identifying witches, and they just asked them these questions. That they had a list of 90 something questions, and they would ask them, and if they went after they'd already been tortured for a while, then they said the witch has agreed to that one, and then they write the whole thing out for them, and then they have, here's the confession. Yeah, right. But so we how much can we get out of the witchcraft trial records? We it's like going to popular TV and saying, what's America like? Well, all of the teenage kids are really sarcastic and witty, but I'm not sure that it's a good way of looking at it. Let's see. Oh, yeah, here I've scrolled into a new page on my notes. We all know Groundhog's Day. If you get 6 weeks of more winter, if the groundhog sees a shadow, goes back underneath. Also, yes. Any form of the marmots, they had groundhogs, badgers, hedgehogs, any of the hibernators. If they started to come up, if their mating instinct was stronger, then they said, okay, it's time for spring. Now, St. Gervais's Day was June 18th. And if it rained on that day, then you would have 40 days of rain afterwards. If on the day of the Feast of the Seven Sleepers, which is June 27th, if it rained, you get 7 weeks of rain. That's because they're 7 sleepers. So, of course, you get a week for each of them. Now, in the Malus Maleficarum, the demonologists described witches stirring up storms and raising tempests and causing hail, solidifying springs of water and melting mountains. Well, all we can say is they're very creative. Possibly they would have done better if they had modern medicine. King James of Scotland, James I of England, was very, very anti-witches. In the beginning of his reign, 1589 or so, what people don't generally understand is that about 20 years later, he wrote an entire refutation, and he said, no, there is no such thing as witches. But having, we all, we love to play the victim. So we're going to demonize King James and say, well, yes, he had a lot of people killed. Well, he did. He totally believed in witches at the beginning of his reign. Mm-hmm. He had arranged marriage with Anne of Denmark over in Denmark, and sent for her to come, and she tried to come over 5 times, but each time the winds pushed her back and into the ports that she had tried to leave from, and so he sailed over, and he was caught in a storm, and because they believed it, they had charges against all of their political rivals, and a lot of poor innocent witches who were accused by people in their neighborhoods. But we got to remember, these are people who lived on the coast, and these witches were doing healing. They were doing weather working. They were doing a lot of witchy stuff and thinking that was just business, until you get politics in with it. You get politics in with it, and then suddenly you got, God, how many of them? A lot of witches killed in those things. But he did actually get to Denmark, and he got married to Anne, and brought her home again. But there were more than 100 witches in that round of the North Berwick trials, and they tortured, found guilty, and executed over 20 of them. The first, but cool, as I told you, James changed his mind, and in 2022, the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, apologized for the persecution of alleged witches during the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries. Said we were wrong and we shouldn't have done that. So, isn't that nice? We have some progress.
Mm-hmm.
In Scandinavia, they used to say that it was Frigga's followers who stirred up the storms on Friday. Say that 3 times fast.
Mm-hmm.
Francis Drake was supposed to have sold his soul to get control of weather magic at sea. And there was a story about a Swabian bailiff's daughter who said that she could get rain. And they said, you can't do that. Prove it. And so she did. So he burned she said she learned it from her mother. So they burned her mother and put her in a nunnery.
Oh.
Because she was 8-year-old kid what 8-year-old kid who's learned how to do this?
Mm-hmm.
Going to say, I can make it rain. Sure. Watch. And okay. And if you've been taught this because it's a useful thing in case you haven't had rain in the last 2 weeks and the crops are drying up, you're not going to think of it as something bad.
But on the other hand, if you don't have that, you're going to be terrified of an 8-year-old who can do it.
Yeah, so put her in a nunnery. Where? Oh, another bit of charming folklore is that when you've eaten an egg, you're supposed to smash the shell so that witches can't ride them out to sea to cause storms.
Oh, it's a witch's boat.
Yeah, God knows what. If you're going to go to sea in an eggshell, I'm not quite sure.
We are doing our breakfast sandwiches all wrong because they don't smash the shells.
Yeah, that's no doubt why. I particularly was fond of the Christian technique of, if you have a drought, you take the effigy of your saint after you've prayed to it, after you've done processions, after you've given the incense and whatever. If the drought hasn't been lifted, you take the saint's effigy and you put it in water upside down. See if you can convince her to end the drought that way.
So water torture.
There was a story of them doing that in Italy with a saint, and they put the effigy upside down in dung heap to get the saint to do whatever they wanted, and they did. So I guess it worked. But if you tread on an ant, it'll rain. If you tread on a spider, it'll rain. If you sing badly, it will rain. Excuse me. Who gets to decide whether you're singing badly? Then there's the lovely, if you pull a face and face into the wind, then it's going to stick.
I didn't know about the facing into the wind part.
Yeah, you gotta face into the wind. I also have a magical phrase, Shagada Gala. Let's see. Let's I can write that one on in the
in the chat.
thing to everyone. I don't know what language it is, and they're learning a lot more of Gada Galet. And that is an old magical phrase for controlling the weather, and I don't know where it's from. So, because don't you just hate when the research you're doing is leaving important things? But there are good. The Saint Swithin's Day is Saint Swithin's Day. If thou dost reign for 40 days, it will remain. Saint Swithin's Day, if thou be fair, then 40 days will reign no mere. So, in Saint Swithin was an Anglo-Saxon saint from the 10th century. In 971, he was moved. He asked to be not buried in the cathedral, which is full of it's where you put your special people, right? He wanted to be buried under the eaves of the church, so he did, and that's where they would put, stillborn babies and anybody that wasn't important, and he's just being humble. So Ethelwald, who was the Bishop of Winchester, moved him into the cathedral, and it rained for 40 days. And he's like, okay, whatever, okay, that's that, and he moved him back out. So that's where that one came from. God knows where some of the other ones came from. But
I just remembered something about Groundhog's Day.
Oh, cool.
Not associated with the groundhogs so much, but apparently that day of the year in some cultures was you go out and you look at the sky in each of the 4 directions, and each of them correlates to what the weather will be during an upcoming season. And so I forget which one was which, but if you look to the north, for instance, that might be winter. And if you go look to the east, that might be spring, and so forth. And you look what the sky looks like, and that's what the weather's going to be like for that season.
Yeah, that's your basic area, Mancy. And I was kind of wondering if you had to take every freaking thing you saw in the sky, every bird you saw in the Roman bird divination. It's like, how are you going to say, no, we only count 3 kinds of birds, and all we're asking is, are they coming from the west? Are they going to the east? Are they going this way? Are they going that way? There were just some basic, the augury was a lot more simple than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, fine. I thought you had to learn all of it. Now, for modern witches, you want to learn, let's talk about doing it. If you want to learn about weather, work on your own local weather. You feel it. You look in the sky where it's going from. You become one with you try and get so that you're working with the spirit of the air, the spirits of your own area, so that you know whether they're feeling cranky, whether they're feeling friendly. Does it seem like you could smell it coming? You can and I forgot to mention with Sir Francis Drake, he was supposed to have raised the storm that got the Spanish Armada. He had a drum that he was supposed to play. Yeah, Bill Griffin.
Yes, I'm thinking about how I feel about the weather when I walk outside, and I know there's a weather change coming. No, whether that means we're going to be dumped with a foot of snow or whatever. Well, you mentioned smelling it. I don't so much smell it, but there is this gut feeling that says something is about to change. And I don't know how to really go anywhere with that.
Well,
I can look.
One of the things you could do would be use the poem from the beginning of Mary Poppins, winds from the west, front's
Hmm.
coming in, something's
Yeah,
about to
okay,
begin.
red sky in the morning, Taylor's sake warning.
But you can, I mentioned Mary Poppins because you can use anything. If
Yeah.
it's something that resonates with you, it's gonna work. So
Okay.
that's one of the things. But one of the things you can do is you can make whistles. You can make whistle out of willow or alder. You can blow over the edge of a glass bottle. You know how you take a bottle and you go,
Oh, well,
and
yeah.
you get that.
And you
uh,
get some really good bass notes out of the big ones.
Yeah, well, the thing is, what you're trying to do is you're supposed to be getting a sound that's going to call to the rain. So they would use the bull roars where you have a slightly twisted
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
out of lightning struck oak and spin that around. That
Lightning struck oak. Okay.
really weird sound should call up a storm. You can also swing a bag of lungwort. And you can make some traditions made special weatherworking brooms that were specifically only used for weatherworking, as opposed to all the different things you can use a broom for. So another thing that you can do if you want to mess with the weather is, a thing that we all have around. We don't all have around, but I do. Is your pendulum, which
Yeah.
is some of it is it will go away. Some of it is like, show me a yes, show me a no. Wait, if I put it right, you can see that.
Well,
It'll
the
say,
two
show
things
me
you're
this
gonna-
this is a no and this is a yes. But
right. Now,
if
the
you
two things you
take
wanna
it
keep-
over a map, and this is going to become a pretend map, and if you swing it over it, learn your meteorology, learn the symbols on a weather map, learn what the half circles and then the little triangles, learn the highs and lows, and learn how to read those.
The cold fronts, the low fronts.
Then
Yeah.
take your local map
Mhm.
and laminate it.
Mm.
Take a not your Sharpie, but a wipe on, wipe off marker, and put in the fronts that you want. And then you can push them with, you can move them, you can draw the front, you can draw the weather you want in, as a certain 45th president tried to do once. Okay, how's that working out for you?
Yeah.
Not one of his talents. He may have a egregious charisma role, but he's definitely not good with the weather magic.
For a template is what you're
But
saying.
when you consider nuking storms, I don't think the weather spirits are going to be liking you much.
Nope.
Anyway, but you can you want to move the one of the things you can do with your map is, if you've got a heavy hitting storm that's coming right at you, disperse it, spread it, move it out, get it to cover a greater area. That will make it less intense. You can work, as you can with so many things, with moon phases and liminal times, dawn, midday, midnight, twilight.
One
Yeah.
of the things I want to point out from my own perspective about weather working is I don't necessarily want to work the weather. I do, however, want to explore the divinatory side of it, as in mystical meteorology, because I'm not these days so much concerned about changing reality as I am concerned about knowing what it's going to be so I can plan accordingly. And this to me seems more natural to me than saying rain, snow, storm, hail, volcanoes, and lightning go away, don't come back.
Yeah, well,
And
yeah, let me know how that works out for you. But but the big things. It's like they say, if you take a teacup of water, of boiling water, and you pour it into a tub, it's not going to do it. You take a teapot full and it will make an effect. The more local you want your effect, the more impact you're going to have.
and it's worth noting here, when I look at the National Weather Service forecasts, the forecast area is very small. I mean, I can look at it maybe a few square miles at most. I mean, that's the finest granularity I've ever seen in anybody's forecast, because, WSYR will be saying, and they'll have a big map of everything around Syracuse and saying here, 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 here. I got a National Weather Service, and they got this little green blob on the map that extends from my house to the Forest Pharmacy. And I feel like that, local, you want local, they've got local nailed as a concept. And that's one of the factors that works with me when I'm trying to understand the weather.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I learned about understanding the weather, I went to a wonderful workshop by a meteorologist who has worked in Alaska, and she's worked on top of Mount Washington, and she's worked all over the place. And somebody asked the great question, when they say 60% chance of, or 90% chance of, 10% chance, what does that mean? Well, apparently each weather service, there's lots of ways of predicting what's going to come, and each of them works better at one particular aspect. Some of them are very, very good at wind. Some of them are very, very good at predicting the precipitation. Some of them are good. And each of them picked their favorite 10, and that's the one they use. So that when they say 10% chance of, that there's 10% chance of precipitation, it means one of those ones that they use, one of their 10 favorites says there's going to be precipitation and the other 9 don't. If it says 70% chance, it's 7 of their favorite 10 have said whatever it is that they're predicting. And so I never knew what that meant, and that's why it's always
and I've just heard discussions of that recently, and it is important to understand when the cheerful meteorologist on your local channel comes on and says that there's like a 50% chance of precipitation. What you need to do is look at your entire forecast area, divide it up in little blocks, and say, there is a 50% chance that there will be 100% chance of raining or snowing in any of these, but that it doesn't mean you're going to like 50% rain with half raindrops.
Yeah, no, it's simply that's saying how many of their favorite weather predictors agree, and because they're going for all of them. It's like the people, and you've probably seen them, who go to a psychic fair, and they go to 5 psychics, and they see how much the 5 psychics agree with each other.
Tchipakkan, as we get to the last part of the show here, what would you say are the best circumstances and best approaches in which to use weather witching, weather magic?
Okay, yeah, that is there. When to, when not to. I would say that less is better. Do not try to end a drought. Do not try to stop some. If you work, and I want you to think about this. There was 15, 20 years ago in Maine, they were having a big drought. And gee, what a surprise. Covens all over Maine got together and called for rain to end the drought. So after the a few weeks after the big full moon, where all the covens had gotten together, not knowing about each other until later in the there was water 6 feet deep in downtown Portland.
Oh,
It was apparently something similar happened with the wildfires in Australia. You just don't try to, the butterfly effect is real. You can do something small and then, but you don't know what other people are doing. So you have to be very careful. So don't go to fix a problem. Go to try and establish balance, try and reestablish balance. Don't work with selfish reasons or curiosity. If you're going to practice, do it very, very small, because you want to practice so you'll get good. But you want to keep it small so that you're not messing around with someone. If you're just doing this to see if it will work, this is what we call fuck around and find out. And not really something that you want to be doing it for magic. Keep it small. Do not, some people say don't sell it, but don't sell it or give it to somebody who is irresponsible, who is going to be doing something that you know is an idiot. You have, but one of the things you can't, when they say don't do something for I'm not saying don't do something for personal reasons. You do it for personal reasons, it's more likely to work. Like the woman who I taught, I did the Runewalder attunement on her, and she did a protection spell because she heard that she came from Florida. She was at Penzic, and she heard that there was a hurricane aimed right for her hometown. So she sent a protection spell down with the 2 runes for protection and 1 rune for home, and the distance working one, and sent it down to her house, and started packing up so she could head down after the hurricane had passed and go down and clean up. And then the next morning, after the hurricane had gone through, she called up her next door neighbor and said, "How's my house?" And she said, "Your house is fine. Your house is the storm hit exactly on our street. Your house is the only house on the street that hasn't taken major damage. You had a tree fall down in your backyard and it didn't hit anything. Thank you very much. I've got to go and keep working on my house. It needs a new roof." So perfectly reasonable to do something to protect yourself, but it was focused. It was she wasn't trying to save her entire town. She was trying to save her house, and it focused. I don't know if she would have the focus to do the entire to the entire. So yeah, keep it focused, keep it small, go for balance. Don't go for okay, Griffin. Yeah, you have something else to say.
This comment about houses in Florida. All right, so this one person sends down protection and shields her house. Did that in any way contribute to damage around her? Because that's what it suddenly occurred to me. Am I neutralizing the negative effects, or I am deflecting them to my next door neighbor? Because it would bother me a lot if I knew I was shielding my own house at the expense of my neighbors.
I don't believe that when you're protecting yourself, that you are necessarily giving. It isn't a zero sum. Let's face it, the forces of nature are not aiming at you. They are not trying to zap the idiot who's out there yelling Thor is a pushy. What they're trying to do is get a balance of electrons between up here and down there. It's not trying to if you're protecting yourself, then you're not doing anything that is aimed at harming somebody else. Now you can, I mean, you can make a curse pot, which is curse, your basic curse bottle, put pointy stuff, pins, urine, shards, dirt, blood in a bottle, uh, if you're aiming it at somebody, you can take the ashes of a photo or a name and put it in there, and seal it with wax and shake the hell out of it. And
Well, I'm really
anytime you want to
happy with-
reinforce that, you can shake it again. And when you want to end it, you dig out the wax and you dump it out, in preferably in running water.
Well,
Okay,
I
this is-
really like the concept that you pointed out. It's not a zero-sum game. I can help myself without hurting someone else.
Yeah, I mean, and
And that
witch
is
witch
that's
bottles were
crucial.
atropateic. They're against they're against evil. They're not not only were they against evil and frequently said, oh, it's a witch bottle, it's to defend against witches. It's against the witches made them to defend themselves. And certainly if there are crazy people running around saying anybody who's got a witch is burn them. Yeah, you want to protect yourself.
Yeah.
It's not making them, it's the mob isn't going to find somebody if they run around like crazy and look and can't find anyone. They're going to go home and go back to bed and have a drink and go to sleep. We don't try and stop the storm. We might make it go around. We let it do what it wants to do, but just don't hurt us. You can,
And this is a big part of my own internalization of the creed. As long as you harm none, do as thou wilt.
yeah, but you're
And if I
not
protect
trying to harm
myself-
anybody.
Right. But sometimes unintended side effects, you need to guard against those. And I want to make sure that if I'm doing something to protect myself or my family or my house, that I am not unintentionally hurting someone else.
Yeah.
Now I realize that complicates life a lot, but well, crap, that's the way it is.
Well, you can't spend your entire life trying to say I will harm no one and I will I will harm nothing, because that's just not realistic. You can try and do your best to be a force for the positive in the world. You can try to help everybody.
But
If
sometimes
you
you're just not
are
going to see that
feeling-
ant under your foot.
Yeah, you can try not to knock over the anthills. You can try and do everything that seems good to you that will make the world a better place. And if you're putting out nothing but blessings, and nothing but blessings are going to come back on you.
Right.
Why is it that old wizards always look ancient? Well, I suppose if you're 5,000 years old, like Gandalf, he looks pretty good for 5,000 years old. But
Look so good, you will not.
But if you have a wizard who is somebody who is in the Middle Ages and he's 45 and he looks like he's 90, has probably been cursing the heck out of his neighbors, and it's coming back on him.
Right.
Yeah, what you put out does come back to you. So, and
And
one
I
of the things
realize
I did want to encourage people to experiment, because if you're going to be trying it, you'll find out that you can do some things better than other things. You may be more aligned to weather. You may be only able to work locally, but you can't, if you're on vacation, you can't do a damn thing. But try, are you better at pushing it aside? Now, Jane talks about when she was a kid, they'd be on the boat and the fog would be right where they were trying to come into the harbor. Her mother would say, blow a hole in it, and they would use their minds to picture the fog parting, and the fog would part and they would be able to go in. Another thing you can do is you can do cloud busting. You can put a hole in a cloud. Go just someday, just lie down, put a blanket, relax on the grass, and picture a hole forming in a cloud. Now,
well,
you can
I like that.
experiment with what kind of sound will work best for you. You may not be able to whistle. I used to be able to whistle. I can't do it anymore. But you can use a physical whistle. You could use a bottle. You can use a drum. You can use whatever mechanism and find out which one works for you, because it's going to be different from everybody. So let's see, I told you about laminating, making your own map. Oh, right. You can collect the energy of rain, of snow, of thunder, of sun in boils of water, and you bowls of water. Put it out, and you leave it there for all day or during the storm or whatever. And then you take it and you bottle it and you label it, because if you're like me, you will forget which cute little bottle you put it in. And that has it's like homeopathic stuff. You have the energy of the water, and like homeopathic things, just a tiny little bit, you can put that energy of the hail, of the storm, of the thunder, put it out while it's in lightning storm, and you get that in your bottles, and you can have that on your shelf of, these are tools that I can put, you can use that to anoint your various other bits of your spell, whatever else you're using, with those things.
And on a practical level, remember that water can go bad. So
yes, water that is stagnant is
molds and things like
But-
that.
Right, lost its
Keep an
energy,
eye on
picked up negative energy. But yeah, the idea, well, you flounder around trying to figure out how much good can I do without accidentally doing anything bad.
Yeah, well,
And that
you aren't
really,
necessarily. It would have intent, and if you don't have intent to do bad, you're a lot less likely to do bad. Also, if you remember, there was Dr. Emoto from Japan took pictures of water that had been charged with different energy, and he would take pictures and see how the crystallization was affected by the by the music he was using, or sometimes just the energy of, he would put the word love, or he'd put the word peace or on a piece of paper on the bottom of the bottle, and it affected the way that water crystallized when he took the pictures of it. In the Jose Silva and his Silva mind technique,
yeah,
he would put blessing words, whatever he was trying to do, on jugs of water and give them to people to drink, and the words themselves will be passed into the water by your intent. So you can you can use your own symbolism. You can cool off, nourish, cleanse, wash away obstacles, flood if you really want to get rid of something, erase,
if you want to be
release,
biblical
add
about it.
What does the storm or the gentle rain or the snow mean to you? So that's what you would use these energy water things from. And you can add more water, just like homeopathy, add more water. And so after you've taken your teaspoon out to use in your thing, and then you add in a teaspoon of other water, shake it up, and it blesses it, and it becomes more powerful the more you use it. So it's a cool thing. And yes, it is time to stop. Are there any other questions?